The ER doors screamed open at 2:47 a.m., vomiting 3 ambulances into a corridor already choked with the uninsured. Rowan Pierce moved through the chaos like water through wreckage, mop bucket in one hand, steady gaze cataloging everything. He had seen this surge coming. Not the patients. The silence in the system. The way the computers flickered, then died, right when the sickest needed their histories most. A custodian's wage bought observation, not answers. But Rowan asked careful questions about the outage, his voice soft, his eyes tracking the billing terminals with strange precision. He never flinched at talk of debt. That calm was a mask. Behind it, a clock ticked. 24 hours until a hidden creditor would demand a name, or a man in ICU bed 7 would be unplugged for accounting reasons. Jade Carrington, ER nurse, sharp and drowning, fought to keep that patient alive while the screen stayed black. She didn't know Rowan's hands had signed checks that kept these lights on. She didn't know their whispered stairwell moments were built on a lie that would soon protect or destroy them. By dawn, one of them would be forced to kneel in public. By midnight, the truth would cost everything or buy it back. Some secrets survive the night. Most don't. This one decides who breathes and who gets erased. The surge hit like a wave against glass-endless pressure, then shattering. 17 critical patients in 90 minutes, all needing histories that had vanished into digital smoke. Jade's hands moved on autopilot, stabilizing a teenager whose allergy list was locked behind the outage, guessing at contraindications while monitors screamed. The rich arrived by private car, bypassing triage with a phone call to a donor liaison who walked them through a side door. Their files printed instantly from backup servers the poor would never access. Rowan watched from the supply closet threshold, his mop forgotten. He noted which terminals still flickered with green backup lights, donor wing only, and which stayed dead in the public corridors. A billing hold appeared on screen 6, manually entered during the chaos, blocking a trauma patient's surgery until financial verification. He memorized the code. B47X. It appeared twice more that hour, always on the uninsured, always when survival hung by minutes. The disparity wasn't accident. It was architecture. Jade caught his eye across the gurneys, a question in her exhaustion. He looked away. The wrong recognition now would bury them both. But he also saw her saving a homeless man while administrators wheeled a celebrity past, and something in his chest tightened with dangerous purpose. The outage was cover. The real system had never failed. It had simply chosen sides. And Rowan, custodian by uniform, was counting the cost of that choice in lives he could no longer pretend were abstract. What happens when the man who mops your floors knows exactly how much your life is worth on a spreadsheet? The question hung in the fluorescent hum, unanswered but burning. Jade found the hold at 4:15 a.m., buried in a patient's chart like a landmine under leaves. Mr. Henderson, 63, post-stabilization from cardiac arrest, suddenly flagged for pre-authorization pending. The surgery that had saved his life now required approval from a creditor no directory listed. She traced the code through 3 submenus, each deeper than the last, until she hit a firewall labeled External Review Do Not Override. Her license trembled on the edge of that screen. Override meant documentation. Documentation meant audit. Audit meant explaining why she prioritized a poor man's heart over the hospital's cash flow. She thought of her mother's insulin, her nephew's asthma inhalers, the rent spike waiting at home. Compliance was survival. But Mr. Henderson's daughters were sleeping in the waiting room, trusting a system that had already sold their father's debt to shadows. Rowan appeared at her station, not speaking, simply restocking gloves with deliberate slowness. His presence was a pressure valve. She whispered the creditor code. He didn't react, but his hands paused over the box. B47X shows up in maintenance invoices too, he said, voice barely audible. Supply chain. Same prefix. Same silence. The connection was impossible. Custodians didn't read finance archives. But Rowan's eyes held something that wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. Jade's moral horizon split in two. Follow the directive, keep her job, let Henderson wait for a creditor who might never answer. Or dig, risk, and fall. The choice wasn't medical. It was existential. What price is a clean conscience when poverty waits outside with eviction papers? She closed the chart. The hold stayed. But her finger hovered over print long enough to memorize every digit. Malcolm Fenwick arrived at 7 o'clock a.m. like a weather front, immaculate suit, teeth white as surgical bone, smile calibrated to donor comfort. He led a tour of 6 board members through the ER, timing their path between crises, choreographing compassion like theater. Behind closed doors, Jade watched nurses ration saline bags, diluting doses to stretch supply. The donors saw none of it. They saw fresh paint in the VIP wing, new MRI machines with their names on plaques, a community care initiative that existed only in the brochure Malcolm pressed into their hands. Rowan cleaned the same corridor 3 times, always within earshot. He heard Malcolm describe our dedicated frontline heroes while cutting their overtime in the budget meeting that followed. The contrast was surgical. Wealth purchased not just care, but the performance of caring. Poverty bought the reality hallway gurneys, delayed labs, the quiet terror of being seen as cost rather than patient. Jade was assigned to smile for the tour, her exhaustion masked by makeup she couldn't afford. Malcolm touched her shoulder, proprietary, warning. Optics matter, Ms. Carrington. Your department's recent inquiries have been noted. The threat wore silk. She understood the translation. Ask about B47X again, and her family's coverage. Her mother's insulin became a negotiation. Rowan watched the exchange from behind a linen cart. His jaw tightened, not with surprise, but with the controlled anger of someone who had expected this exact choreography. He had seen Malcolm's tactics before. Not as victim. As opponent. The recognition was dangerous. It suggested history. It suggested power disguised as powerlessness. What kind of custodian studies a hospital director's donor strategy with the eyes of a chess player? The question should have terrified her. Instead, it made her want to survive long enough to learn the answer. The locked storage room was in the basement, behind a door labeled Environmental Services Authorized Only. Rowan had the key. Every custodian did. But the boxes inside were not cleaning supplies. They were finance archives, dust-covered, dating back 15 years, labeled with donor codes and creditor chains that matched the B47X prefix. He entered at 3 o'clock a.m., when the building breathed slowest. His flashlight traced rows of sealed records, each box a tombstone of erased obligations. The hospital's debt wasn't owed to banks. It was owed to a network of shell entities, private equity shadows, names that dissolved when searched. Rowan knew them. He had created 2 of them. The discovery should have shocked him. Instead, it confirmed a suspicion that had kept him awake for months. Someone was using his own structure against the hospital he had saved. The irony was surgical. He had built these firewalls to protect charity from bureaucracy. Now they were being weaponized to deny care. Jade's voice echoed in the silence, her whisper about Henderson, her fear, her choice to comply. He had let her carry that alone. The guilt was acid. But exposure now meant losing the leverage he had spent years building. He photographed 3 boxes, careful to catch the donor signatures that matched his own handwriting from a decade past. The proof was here. The identity was here. But the timing was wrong. 22 hours remained until the creditor deadline. Revealing himself now would trigger Malcolm's scapegoat strategy. Jade would be destroyed before the truth could protect her. He sealed the room, returned to his cart, and resumed mopping as if the floor were the only thing that mattered. A security guard passed, nodding. Rowan nodded back, invisible, omniscient. The power of anonymity was also its prison. What good is knowing the truth if speaking it destroys the only person you've dared to love in this place? The question followed him up the stairs, heavy as the boxes had left locked in the dark. The charity pledge board appeared in the atrium at noon, 10 feet of polished oak and gilt lettering, celebrating community champions who had donated over $50,000. Jade watched from the nurse's station as patients were ushered past it, some in wheelchairs still wearing hospital gowns, all instructed to smile for the donors if cameras appeared. The poor were props in their own survival. The board's existence was a moral wound, public gratitude for private extraction, a theater of generosity that masked the billing hold still suffocating the uninsured. Rowan cleaned the base of the display, his bucket positioned to catch the reflections of the names above. He found his own alias there, third from the top, a donation he had made anonymously 6 months prior to cover ICU equipment. The hospital had taken his money and used it to buy chandeliers while denying Henderson his surgery. The betrayal was architectural, built into the walls. Jade approached, her break time to coincide with his route. "They're cutting our supply budget again," she whispered. "While this goes up. While Malcolm's bonus is announced tomorrow." Her voice cracked on the edge of rage. Rowan handed her a coffee head bought with cash, no receipt, untraceable. "The board is a distraction," he said. "Look at what's not listed. The creditors. The real funders. The ones who own the debt, not the charity." She stared at him. The language was wrong. Too precise. Too informed. But her exhaustion swallowed the dissonance. They stood in the shadow of the pledge board, two people invisible to the names above them, bound by a romance that had grown in stairwells and supply closets, fragile, hungry, dangerous. Love in this place was a risk factor. It made you noticeable. It made you targetable. Malcolm passed, his gaze lingering on Jade, then dismissing Rowan as furniture. The dismissal was a gift. It meant the secret was still safe. But for how long? When the people who fund your existence also control your erasure, where do you stand that isn't already collapsing? The directive arrived by text, encrypted, sender masked patient 447 Henderson. Discharge pending. Do not escalate. Compliance preserves licensure. Jade read it in the locker room, her hands shaking against the metal door. The moral test was naked. Now follow the quiet order, let a stabilized man walk into poverty and probable relapse, or challenge it and lose the license that fed 3 generations. She thought of her mother's face, the way she'd looked when Jade passed her boards. The pride. The relief. The debt of love. Rowan found her there, not by accident. He had learned her breaks, her routes, her hiding places. He didn't speak. He simply sat on the bench opposite, his custodial uniform a disguise that had become comfortable, almost natural. "The directive," she said, not asking how he knew. "It's from the same chain. B47X. Everything connects there." He nodded, slow, measured. "I've seen that chain from the inside. Not here. Before. It's designed to be unbreakable because it's designed to be invisible." The admission was a crack in his mask. She should have pressed. Should have asked what before meant, what inside looked like. But the terror of knowing fought with the terror of not knowing. "If I override," she whispered, "they'll say I panicked. That I misread the situation. Malcolm's already planted that narrative. I've seen the draft incident report." Rowan's eyes changed. Something cold, something prepared. The narrative is planted because the truth is documented. Somewhere. In a room you don't have access to. With people who don't wear uniforms. He stood, touched her hand once, withdrew. The intimacy was a promise and a warning. She was not alone. But she was also not protected. The choice remained hers. The consequences would be shared or suffered alone. What does courage look like when the system has already written your confession of cowardice? Jade deleted the text. But she screenshot it first. The evidence was a seed. Whether it grew or rotted depended on whether she could survive the soil it was planted in. They met in stairwell C at 11:47 p.m., the only place without cameras, the only silence not owned by the hospital. Jade's hands were still wet from a code blue she'd lost a teenager, uninsured, B47X hold on the transfusion that would have saved him. Rowan's bucket was outside, props for anyone who checked. Inside, they were simply human. "I can't keep doing this," she said, not crying, past tears. "Being the face they put on brochures while I watched them die in hallways." Rowan's back was against the concrete, his posture loose, but his eyes were calculating distances, how far to the exit, how long until the next security sweep, how much time they had before exposure. "You're not the face," he said. "You're the blood. They're the photograph. That's the difference between charity and care." The words were too crafted, too polished for a custodian. She noticed. She let it go. The need for his presence outweighed the need for his explanation. They shared a protein bar, split down the middle, a communion of poverty and exhaustion. "If I fight this," Jade whispered, "they'll take everything. My license. My apartment. My mother's coverage. They've already threatened it." Rowan's jaw tightened. "I know. I've seen the files. The leverage is systematic. It's not personal, which makes it worse. It's industrial." She turned to him, finally, fully. "How do you see files? How do you know Malcolm's patterns? Who were you before this uniform?" The questions hung. He didn't answer. Instead, he kissed her, once, desperate, a promise that whatever he was hiding, it wasn't betrayal of her. The romance was a risk factor now, undeniable. Love in war zones creates targets. They were marking each other for destruction, and they knew it. But the alternative was solitude in a place that fed on isolation. 20 hours, he said against her hair. "Something changes in 20 hours. I need you to trust until then." "Trust what? Trust whom?" The stairwell didn't answer. But her hand stayed in his, and that was choice enough. The discharge block hit at 6:00 a.m., surgical and absolute. Patient 447 Henderson, cleared by 3 specialists, suddenly required creditor approval for release. No one could explain the creditor. No directory listed them. The approval had to be sought through proper channels, which were closed until Monday, 48 hours away. Jade stood at the nurse's station, watching Henderson's daughters cry, watching the man who had survived cardiac arrest now face death by accounting. The cruelty was elegant. The hospital retained the bed, billed for extended observation, and avoided the liability of a discharged patient relapsing uninsured. Profit from paralysis. Rowan moved through the scene, delivering linens, his eyes tracking the security guard who had been stationed outside Henderson's door since 5:00 a.m. Not protection. Containment. The patient had become a hostage. Jade's override codes had been revoked overnight, her access downgraded. The retaliation was swift, invisible, deniable. She was being taught a lesson in real time. Malcolm appeared at 7:30, smooth, concerned, publicly investigating the delay while privately ensuring it persisted. "These administrative mix-ups are regrettable," he told the family, his hand on the father's shoulder, the photograph already being staged for the donor newsletter. Jade watched the performance, understanding its architecture. The public face of compassion masked the private machinery of denial. And somewhere in that machinery was a name. A creditor who had bought Henderson's debt and now owned his future. Rowan brushed past her, dropping a folded note into her pocket. She read it in the bathroom. B47X is a chain. Follow the payments backward. Not forward. The origin is the weapon. The instruction was cryptic, but the trust was absolute. She spent her shift tracing reverse transactions, finding a pattern. Every blocked discharge, every delayed surgery, every creditor approval originated from the same postal address. A department that didn't exist. A ghost in the machine. What do you do when you find the devil's address? but the devil owns the mail system. The question pulsed as she copied the address, her heart hammering against ribs that felt increasingly like bars. Malcolm escalated at noon, his methods shifting from threat to demolition. Jade found her schedule for next week 0 hours. A clerical error, HR claimed, investigating. Her mother's insurance portal showed a pending review flag that hadn't existed yesterday. Her nephew's inhaler prescription was suddenly non-formulary. The chain of punishment was comprehensive, personal, designed to demonstrate that resistance was not just futile but familial. Malcolm summoned her to his office, the view of the city behind him a reminder of how small she was, how high he stood. "You've been spreading panic," he said, not angry, disappointed, the worst tone. "Misinformation about creditor holds. Donors are concerned. The board is concerned." He slid a document across the desk. A prepared statement. An apology. Public, in the atrium, during the donor gala tomorrow night. Read this. Mean it. Or your mother's review becomes a denial. Your license becomes a question of mental fitness. Your relationship with certain staff becomes a policy violation. The last was new. He knew about Rowan. Not the truth of him, but the existence of them. The leverage was total. Jade's hands trembled on the statement, reading words she had never spoken, admitting to panic she had never felt, apologizing for truth she had never told. Rowan's face filled her mind, his steady hands, his careful questions, his silence about his past. If she read this, she protected him. If she refused, they both burned. The choice was designed to break her either way. She left with the statement in her bag, unsigned, her mind racing through escape routes that didn't exist. Rowan met her in the parking garage, his uniform dark with rain he hadn't bothered to avoid. "He threatened my family," she said, flat. "He knows about us. He's going to make me apologize for existing." Rowan's expression didn't change, but something in him hardened, a decision crystallizing. The gala. Tomorrow. That's the timeline. Not a question. A confirmation. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. He didn't answer. But his hand found hers, and for a moment, the parking garage was the only place in the world where power didn't reach. The moment was a lie. They both knew it. But it was a lie they needed to survive the night. How do you love someone when your survival requires their silence, and their silence is killing you both? The garage didn't answer. The rain did, drumming a rhythm that sounded increasingly like countdown. Rowan noticed the pattern at 2:00 a.m., alone in the records room he had learned to access without logging. Payment codes repeating across unrelated charts, B47X variants, each slightly different, each tied to a patient, a discharge block, a life suspended. He traced them manually, refusing the digital trail that could be erased. The repetition was the signature of automation. Someone had built an algorithm of denial, feeding on debt, producing profit from care withheld. And someone had noticed him noticing. The security guard from Henderson's floor appeared in the corridor, casual, asking about unusual access patterns in the basement. Rowan's explanation: cleaning schedule, supply check was accepted too easily. The guard was testing, not investigating. Reporting back. Rowan spent the next hours planting false trails, accessing decoy files, creating a pattern of a confused custodian looking for overtime loopholes. The performance was exhausting. The reality was worse. He had built the original code architecture. The B47X prefix was his signature, a donor anonymity system he had designed to protect charity from taxation and publicity. Someone had reverse-engineered it into a weapon. The guilt was geological, layers of good intention compressed into something crushing. Jade's face haunted the margins of every chart, her exhaustion, her choice to comply, her choice to resist. He had let her carry the moral weight alone because his intervention would expose the power that could save her. The paradox was killing them both. At 4:00 a.m., He found the repetition source, a single terminal in donor relations, accessing patient billing under the guise of charity allocation review. The user ID was Malcolm's assistant. The timestamp pattern matched the discharge blocks. The chain was complete. But the proof was still circumstantial. He needed the sealed envelope. The one addressed to the department that didn't exist. The one that had arrived yesterday, according to the mail log, and been routed to Malcolm's private safe. The clock showed 18 hours. The gala began at 7. The envelope was the key. But safes required combinations, and combinations required time, and time was the one currency the hospital never gave to people like them. What do you steal when the only thing worth stealing is the truth, and the truth is locked in a box you built yourself? The question rotated in the dark, unanswered, urgent. The envelope appeared in hospital mail at 8:00 a.m., addressed to Department of External Creditor Relations Confidential. The department existed in no directory, reported to no administrator, appeared on no org chart. Jade intercepted it by accident, her route to payroll taking her past the sorting station when the courier's back was turned. The envelope was heavy, legal-sized, sealed with wax bearing a donor insignia she recognized from the pledge board. Rowan's alias. The connection was impossible. She hid it in her locker, heart pounding, mind racing through implications that refused to resolve. Rowan found her there, his presence sudden, his eyes finding the envelope before she spoke. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said, not angry, resigned. "Not yet. Not until tonight." "Until what tonight?" she demanded, voice rising, control breaking. "What is this? Why is my hospital's creditor using your donor seal? Who are you?" The questions were avalanche. He took the envelope, careful, reverent, as if it contained not paper but detonation cord. "I'm the reason this hospital survived 2019, he said, the admission quiet, devastating. Anonymous donor. Structured the debt relief. Built the firewall that protected charity from the board's greed. And now someone's using my own architecture to destroy the people I was trying to save." The identity was partial, hedged, still disguised in the language of past tense. But the shape of it was clear. Rowan was not poor. Rowan had never been poor. Rowan had chosen this uniform, this invisibility, this proximity to suffering he could have avoided forever. Jade's world tilted. The romance had been real. The exhaustion, the shared protein bars, the stairwell kisses all real. But the context was forgery. She had loved a ghost wearing poverty like a costume. Why? She whispered, the word containing multitudes. Why hide? Why watch me struggle? Why let Malcolm threaten my family when you could, because exposure now means Malcolm wins, he interrupted, urgent. He's built a scapegoat strategy. If I reveal myself before the envelope opens, you're the panic spreader, I'm the delusional custodian with a crush, and the truth dies in ridicule. The envelope has proof of his manipulation of my donor structure. Proof that ties him to the creditor chain. But it has to be opened publicly, legally, with witnesses. Tonight. At the gala. The plan was insane. The risk was total. But the alternative was Henderson's death, her apology, their erasure. She looked at the envelope, then at him, searching for the man she had loved and the power he now admitted. They were both there. Both real. Both endangered. What do you do when the person who lied to you is also the only person who can save you? The locker room held its breath. So did she. Jade pulled the record at 3:00 p.m., a retrieval that shouldn't have been possible, from a database that shouldn't have existed. The sealed envelope's return address had led her to a backup server, archaic, unnetworked, storing financial transactions from the 2019 debt restructuring. The record showed the origin of B47XA holding company registered to Rowan's alias, designed to anonymize charity, now hijacked by Malcolm's shell entities. The chain was complete. The hidden creditor was a mere Rowan's own creation turned against his intention. She printed the evidence in the radiology department, using a terminal no one monitored, watching the pages emerge like a confession. The proof was irrefutable. Malcolm had taken a system built to protect the poor and weaponized it to exploit them. The timeline was surgical. The cruelty was industrial. And the gala was in 4 hours. Rowan met her in the stairwell, the envelope now in his possession, the record in hers. They didn't speak. They simply exchanged the documents, a transfer of power between two people who had learned to communicate in silence. But the silence was broken by footsteps. Malcolm's security, sweeping early, suspicious of the day's anomalies. They pressed into the corner, bodies close, breath held, the evidence crushed between them. The guard passed. The danger passed. But the intimacy remained, charged, changed. Tonight, Rowan whispered, I stand up. I speak. I end this. But you have to be far away when I do. Hell retaliate. Hell try to destroy you before the truth lands. No, Jade said, firm, final. You don't get to disappear me to protect me. I'm the nurse who found the record. I'm the one he tried to break. I'm standing there when that envelope opens, or it doesn't open at all. The negotiation was brief, fierce, ending in a kiss that tasted like war. They were no longer just lovers. They were co-conspirators. The risk had doubled. The power had shifted. But the outcome was still uncertain. When the evidence that frees you also exposes the lie that brought you together, what survives the revelation? The stairwell offered no prophecy. Only the echo of their breathing, and the distant sound of gala preparation, wealth assembling to celebrate its own image, unaware that the reckoning had been invited. The atrium was cathedral-like at 7:00 p.m., crystal and marble celebrating donor generosity while the poor were barred from the main entrance. Jade stood on the stage Malcolm had prepared, the apology statement in her shaking hands, the crowd below her a sea of wealth and expectation. The humiliation was architecture. The lighting was surgical. The moment was designed to break her publicly, to transform her resistance into a narrative of female hysteria, to prove that questioning power was madness. Malcolm introduced her with sorrow, concern, the disappointed father punishing the errant child. Ms. Carrington has asked to address some concerns she raised earlier. We believe in transparency. We believe in healing. The words were poison. She looked for Rowan in the crowd, couldn't find him, felt the isolation close like a fist. The apology began, her voice mechanical, reading words that confessed to panic, to misinformation, to the sin of caring too much in a system that punished caring. The crowd murmured approval. The donors nodded, validated. The erasure was nearly complete. Then the doors opened. Not dramatically. Simply, finally, Rowan entering in his custodial uniform, carrying the sealed envelope, moving through the crowd with the authority of someone who had never been invisible, only waiting. He reached the stage, not asking permission, and stood beside her. The juxtaposition was electric wealth and poverty, power and performance, the lie and the truth wearing the same face. This envelope, he said, his voice carrying without microphone, is addressed to a department that doesn't exist. It contains proof that the creditor holding patient Henderson and 30 others is a shell entity controlled by this hospital's director, using a donor anonymity system I designed in 2019. The silence was absolute. Malcolm's smile froze. Jade felt the axis shift, humiliation transforming into platform, her shame becoming the stage for his revelation. Rowan opened the envelope. The documents were real. The signatures matched. The chain was exposed. But the cost was immediate. Security moved. Malcolm shouted. And Jade, still holding the apology she had never believed, stepped forward to read the evidence aloud, her voice steady now, powered by the truth that had finally been spoken. What happens when the scapegoat refuses the altar and burns the temple instead? The atrium answered with chaos, with law, with the beginning of the end. The sealed envelope opened like a flower of evidence, each page a petal of indictment. Rowan's voice remained steady as he traced the B47X chain from his original donor structure through Malcolm's shell entities to the discharge hold suffocating the poor. The documents were originals, not copies, bearing the legal weight of authenticity. Malcolm's face cycled through emotions: denial, rage, calculation, finally settling on the polished mask of legal preparation. But the crowd was shifting. Donors recognizing their own names on charity pledges that had been diverted. Board members seeing liability bloom like mold. Jade read the patient records, the discharge blocks, the creditor approvals that had no human author, only algorithmic cruelty. The public exposure was surgical. Every claim Rowan made was documentable. Every document was witnessable. The power reversal had begun. Security reached the stage, but stopped, uncertain, their paychecks signed by the man now being unmasked. The legal mechanism emerged from the envelope's final page: a state health regulator complaint, pre-filed, stamped, awaiting only the public testimony to activate. Rowan had not just brought proof. He had brought the law, frozen in readiness, waiting for this moment of witness. Malcolm's scapegoat strategy collapsed under the weight of structured preparation. The man who had built systems to protect charity had built one final system to protect truth. The irony was complete. The justice was mechanical. But the emotional scar was already forming. Jade looked at Rowan, this stranger in familiar skin, this millionaire in custodian's clothes, and felt the romance fracture under the pressure of revelation. Love had grown in whispered equality. Could it survive this inequality of power? The question waited. The atrium roared with consequence. But between them, in the space where trust had lived, there was only the echo of a lie that had been necessary, and the uncertain beginning of whatever came next. When the truth sets you free, why does it feel like the end of the only world you knew? The identity reveal completed itself in the regulator's questions, the timeline Rowan provided, the signature matches that only the original architect could explain. He was the anonymous donor behind the hospital's 2019 survival, the proof in the envelope's donor notes, his handwriting on the original B47X charter, his knowledge of the creditor chain's deepest nodes. The confirmation was not dramatic. It was forensic. Each detail he provided matched records no one else had accessed. Each explanation resolved questions that had haunted the board for years. Jade watched from the witness chair, her testimony already given, her license temporarily protected by the investigation's freeze on personnel actions. Rowan spoke of planting the original donor codes and maintenance invoices to track fund flow, of designing the anonymity system to protect recipients from gratitude's burden, of watching Malcolm reverse engineer his protection into predation. The narrative was complete. The justice was earned. But the personal cost was immediate. A reporter asked the question everyone feared: why the disguise? Why watch the suffering you could have stopped? Rowan's answer was quiet, devastating. Because charity without proximity becomes performance. Because I needed to see if the system I built worked, or if it was just another wall between the rich and the poor. Because I fell in love with someone who didn't know she was talking to a ghost, and I couldn't bear to be the reason she stopped talking. The admission was public. The vulnerability was total. Jade felt the fracture in her chest, the anger at the lie, the gratitude for the truth, the recognition that his poverty had been real to her, even if it had been choice to him. The power reversal was complete in the legal sense. Malcolm was escorted out, his assets frozen, his reputation in litigation. But the power imbalance between them remained, raw, unaddressed. They stood in the atrium's aftermath, surrounded by regulators and reporters, alone together in the way that only shared destruction can create. The romance had survived the revelation. But it was changed. Scarred. Honest in ways that hurt. What do you say to the man who saved your hospital, your patient, your future, by lying to you about who he was? The atrium offered no script. Only the truth, finally spoken between them, and the uncertain work of building something new from the ruins of the old. The public and legal power reversal finalized at dawn, regulators issuing an emergency injunction freezing all creditor actions tied to B47X, the state attorney's office opening a criminal referral for billing coercion and patient endangerment. Malcolm's fall was public, complete, his donor-facing smile mugshot bound, his power evaporating into legal proceedings that would outlast his reputation. The hospital entered receivership, not closure, protected by Rowan's original donor structure now restored to its intended purpose. The poor began receiving care again, not because of charity, but because the law had finally seen the mechanism of their denial. Jade's license was cleared, her family's coverage restored, her apology retracted and replaced with a commendation for ethical courage. But the emotional scar remained. She and Rowan met in the stairwell where they had first kissed, the space unchanged, the people transformed. He wore civilian clothes now, the uniform discarded, the disguise no longer necessary. She wore her scrubs, the identity she had never hidden, the struggle she had never chosen. "I don't know how to love you now," she said, honest, brutal. "I knew how to love the man who mopped floors and noticed everything. I don't know the man who built hospitals and wore poverty like a mask." Rowan nodded, accepting the weight. "Then don't love the builder. Love the witness. The one who saw you save lives while I pushed carts. That man is real. He's just not the only one." The negotiation was open-ended. The romance was not healed, but it was possible. They had survived the revelation, the humiliation, the legal war. But survival was not resolution. The justice payoff was real. Henderson discharged, creditors exposed, Malcolm indicted, but the cost was the innocence of their beginning. They left the stairwell separately, not from lack of love, but from the need to rebuild trust in daylight, without the pressure of crisis. The hospital continued. The patients continued. The rich and poor continued their ancient war. But for one moment, in one place, the power had reversed, the truth had spoken, and love had survived, scarred, honest, and changed. What remains when the emergency ends and the lovers must learn who they are to each other without the danger that brought them together? Only the future, unwritten, and the courage to meet it. The story of Rowan and Jade is not a romance of rescue. It is a romance of witness, of seeing clearly in a system designed to obscure, of choosing proximity over power, of paying the cost for truth that arrives too late to be painless. The justice they won was real, the creditor chain exposed, the patients freed, the predator indicted. But justice is not healing. The emotional scar of Rowan's disguise and Jade's humiliation will mark their love long after the legal victories fade. They do not end with a kiss in the rain. They end with a choice to continue, knowing now the full weight of what they carry. This is the work of stories that matter, not to comfort, but to confirm that survival is possible, that power can be reversed, that love can persist even when the foundation of its beginning crumbles. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in the stairwell or the atrium, then you are part of the witness now. The systems that exploit depend on our silence. Your voice, your share, your comment that says "I saw this," is the next envelope opening. Like this video not for the algorithm, but for the next person who needs to know they're not alone in seeing. Comment with the moment that broke your heart or rebuilt it. Was it the humiliation, the reveal, the stairwell promise? Share this with someone drowning in a system that tells them their poverty is personal failure. Subscribe not for more content, but for more courage, the kind that costs something, the kind that wins. The next story waits in the shadows of another hospital, another school, another boardroom where power wears a smile. Well, be there, watching, ready to name the creditor when the time comes. Until then, remember, the uniform does not make the person. The witness does. And the witness is always more powerful than the system expects.